All right, you all. Good afternoon. Um, I'm actually really, really excited. We're gonna go ahead and jump in. Um, I think David, was that you? Did you say hello?
Yes, hello.
Hello. Hi.
I'll be co-hosting and try to answer any questions in the chat for you as we go along. If there's any that I see I can't answer, I might just at the end pause and say, let's see if we can't hit these. But yeah, certainly. Take it away.
All right, awesome. First off, David, I actually do have a couple of questions that I want to ask the audience, and if you can do me a favor and read them off, that would be great, just so that I'm not like stretching too thin. But first off, you all, welcome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day, especially after school, if you are still in school. My name is Kia London, and I am here with you this evening to talk about low prep, high impact activities, which happen to be my absolute favorite. Before we get started, I would love to know where you all are joining in from. If you can type that in the chat, that would be great.
I see Boulder, Colorado, Boston, Massachusetts, Houston, Texas, Los Angeles, rather, California, Redlands, California, St. Louis, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Texarkana, several different places.
Awesome.
Hampton.
Oh my goodness, awesome. So full transparency, you all, I am joining you from Chicago. I'm just going to say Chicago because here we don't really say Illinois. I am tuning in from the northwest suburbs of the Chicagoland area, but I am originally from Chicago and I'm a Chicago gal. My other question, thank you all so much for sharing. I'm curious to know, when does school end for you, or if it's already ended?
Looks like early June. So somebody said tomorrow. Uh,
Oh,
but yes, early June. We have one person. End of May. Oh, somebody said yesterday. Very nice.
okay, all right. Okay.
Ah,
All right, awesome. So then it's coming around. Okay. So yes, y'all. So we've started like finals. And next week is like our official final week. It's very, different with the World Language Department because we give a speaking and a writing portion of our final, and then we have like a multiple choice. So the multiple choice one is next week. Um, and then the 3rd of June, I think that Monday, like we are finished. So great. Awesome. All right. Thank y'all so much for sharing. We are gonna go ahead and keep going. All right, you all. So a little bit about my background here. My name is Kia London. I am a teacher first. I've been teaching for 19 years. I actually started my career at the high school level. I taught Spanish 1, 2, 3, and I think I had a couple of students that were placed in 4. So I had a variety of novice to advanced learners. And then after that, I decided to transition to elementary, and I taught elementary for 4 years, K through fourth. I really enjoyed it, and that was really where my journey began of proficiency when it came to really observing and interacting with the students on from another perspective of in terms of watching them acquire the language versus very, very grammar-driven instruction. And then I spent 9 years in middle school. I don't know if we have any middle school teachers here, but middle school will always have my heart. I enjoyed it. Oh, okay. I enjoyed it, loved it. And I will say my grades six, I would say sixth and eighth, probably my two, preferable grades, but fifth as well. And then now I am actually back to high school. This past year, I taught novice learners, ranging from novice low to novice high. So that's Spanish one. And then next year, I am going to be teaching Spanish two, and a new section of Spanish five that just popped up. So I'm really, really excited about that. One thing about my journey, you all, is that I really try to look at all different aspects of what we are called to do as teachers, right? So we have our content, and we also have, the administrative duties as well. And then in addition to that, we have to think about the pedagogy, right? In terms of how we are going to bring forth the content in a way so that students are utilizing their ability to acquire a language and grow, right? So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and we are going to jump in. One thing I want to make mention of that I didn't, there's a picture here of a book that I'm currently reading. It's called Unearthing Joy, A Guide to Culturally and Historically Responsive Teaching and Learning. Highly recommend that book. As we go through the different activities and strategies that I'm really excited to share with you all this evening, um, a lot of the strategies that I'm sharing really fit and align with what we think when we talk about like culturally responsive teaching. And when I say that, I'm saying that in terms of taking a look at who your students are, where they're at, if you've been teaching for a while, or whether or not you just started, education has changed, right? When I started teaching in 2006, the learners were completely different, right, than what we have now. So really looking at the students that we have in front of us, and how we can best not only give them the experience that we want them to have in language, but also how to best and effectively teach them in class as well. Okay, so there are three commonalities here as I go through and talk about strategies for you all to use: student-centered, feedback in real time, and preserving your energy. Student-centered is my favorite. It is my favorite, and it should be everybody's favorite, because it really gives students the opportunity to show you what they can do while you are listening and watching them problem solve. And that is a huge thing, especially with the generation of learners that we have today. Feedback in real time, I love it, because with each and every activity that I've done, I've had an opportunity to walk around, give them that feedback in real time, not only for assurance, but also really to challenge them. I know sometimes whenever my students have asked me, like, oh, is this right? And what about this? And I'm like, well, what do you think? Let's go back. Let's take a look at this. Did you have XYZ? So really getting them to that place of where they have the confidence that it is that they need. And then also preserving our energy. Okay. One thing I will say, you all, transitioning from middle school and back to high school this year, I have really learned the importance of preserving the energy, especially if you are teaching in block classes. All right. The fact of the matter, being on our feet the entire time, we can have a seat. We can have a seat. We can watch the students do what they do, and we can also be valuable in that moment as well. Okay, so first things first, this is probably my favorite. Um, Comprehensible input flashcards through gamification. Okay. So, one thing about the book that I mentioned, Culturally Responsive Teaching, gamification actually came up. in terms of that being a strategy for today's learners, today's generation. Now, there are a couple of games that I use. I don't use any and everything because, listen, it's just for me, I have to pick a couple and then I've got to focus my energy in on that. GimKit right now is my favorite. I really love it for a variety of reasons. Number one, I do know that it was created by a student. I want to say he was in middle school at the time. And the students now, like, they really enjoy it. I was really hesitant because I was just like, well, I don't know if my high school students are going to want to play GimKit still, but they love GimKit. Kahoot is another one. If you are using that one, Quizlet, I know right now our district is putting a stop on it because there's some privacy issues and things like that. And then there's also Quizzes, which I know that is an incredible tool as well, and I'm looking forward to using that. Now, a couple of strategies that I've used when it comes to comprehensible input. So again, ensuring that our students are receiving input from whichever target language that we do speak. For example, I teach Spanish. I don't even think I talked about that. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Um, and making it applicable, and also, I don't even know if I really want to say appropriate. That's probably not the right word, but making it applicable to where they're at in terms of so that they can acquire that language. So whether you use cognates, whether you utilize words and phrases that you've already introduced in class, that would be an example of comprehensible input. So for example, if you have a flashcard, because I know if we think about it, when we have the word pool, for example, vocabulary word pool, we might have what it means in the target language. Okay. So instead of doing that, we can provide a definition or a description. So in this case, where someone goes to swim in their neighborhood or community, there you go. And then in that way, instead of the learners, flipping through either, the flashcards, okay, pool means this, and so forth in English or either in German and so forth, it gives them an opportunity to start to use those skills of circumlocution. And so then they are reading, they are getting that input right then and there through these different ways of gamification. This is something that I've used for my students for GimKit and also for Quizlet. And for Kahoot, if you're familiar with Kahoot, I've also used this particular setup with my middle schoolers where I would come up with a list of like comprehension questions. And so then from there, instead of me, writing it down on a sheet of paper, I would just put it in flashcards, right? So where are you from? I am from. Now, the only thing with setting up that Kahoot is that you have to come up with the other options. So that might take a little bit of time, but it's definitely worth it because again, they're reading and then they're also answering, those questions as well. Okay. So my other favorite for low prep is student choice board. Um, I'm going to bring this back up, but there is a good reason. So back in 2020, that year with all the screens, um, I remember, of course, there was a surge of e-learning, hence my example right here. Okay. So with that in mind, I really feel like even at that moment, because we were teaching on screens, or I don't know, maybe some of us were hybrid, some of us were in school for a certain period of time, and then you went home and then you taught like from the screen, which is something that I did. Um, we were very creative in being able to find a variety of ways to really reach our learners. And one of those was a choice board. Um, so, for example, one thing that I would have the students do, I would give them a link to YouTube videos of audiobooks in the target language. And because at the time I was teaching novice learners, um, they were at that particular level. It wasn't like, like at an advanced level if we're, thinking about the OPI proficiency, type thing. So that was an option. The other option I would have them do is they would have to listen to a series in the target language. If you teach Spanish, I know one series that I utilized, it was called Buena Gente. And so I would link that like in a chart. The other option I gave them was they could journal. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that of how I put that together in the target language. They could journal. Um, and then from there, what I would have them do as well, I would give them a link to a podcasts, access to a variety of different podcasts. What I love about what's happening now, there's so many different podcasts out there. You can easily get your students to utilize that as a resource in order to build their skills in that particular language. And so I would divide the paper up into maybe like 6 sections, and then they would choose whatever they wanted to do. And then, I would have some type of a follow-up assignment. And so the assignment would be, for example, tell me what you learned. Why was this important? If it was a reading, if they chose the reading option where they were listening to the audiobooks on YouTube or either from another site, they would have to tell me, okay, what were 5 new vocabulary words that you learned? And give me a brief summary of what you understood in English. So choice boards are always a wonderful, wonderful way to go when it comes to low prep. I mean, they're great for a Friday, depending on what it is that you're doing as well. David, did we have any questions or anything? I can't really see, so I just wanted to like pause because I feel like I'm talking.
I'm not seeing any yet. Well, I think we're still good to go.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Okay. All right, we're gonna move on. Ooh, chat mats. How many of you all have utilized and or are utilizing chat mats? Okay. Yes. David, do we have a lot of yeses in there in the chat box?
I'm seeing a lot of yeses in the chat. I'm also seeing a number of people nodding, thumbs up, etc.
Awesome. You all, chat mats are my saving grace, and I literally mean that. These are just great, okay? And they're great for a variety of reasons. Number one, it really encourages your students to apply what we call memorized phrases. And it also encourages them to start building and forming their sentences, right? So we're getting them, if we're looking at where they're starting, especially if they're novice, and we're getting them to that novice high, intermediate, low piece, right? Now, you can also use chat mats at the advanced level as well. That also works too. Um, these are hanging up in my room. And we have used them, I want to say Mondays, whenever we come back from school. We've utilized, in particular, for example, when the students had talked about what they did over the weekend. We've also utilized El Check-in, the check-in, which is great. This is great to really get a gauge in terms of knowing like where your students are at mentally, you know, physically, what's going on in their lives, because 9 times out of 10, we know that our students are dealing with a lot outside of the class. And it's also a great gauge. So, I don't know, maybe I need to change some things today. So chat mats are great. You can have the students talk to a variety of people in the classroom. You can do alternating groups. You can do rotating circles, depending on, what it is that you're focusing in on. And it doesn't necessarily have to be focused in on your quote unquote theme. Okay. I like to call this, especially with the weekend, I like to call this like a belonging like type activity because you're really getting to know, the lives of your students outside of class. And you don't have to do this, you don't have to just do this at the very beginning of the year. This can go on throughout the year. And it's great because I know sometimes on Sundays we're just like, okay, what am I going to teach? And here you have it. You have your chat mat. You can have your students talk about what they did over the weekend. You can do a check-in with them where they can share that, be it that they are comfortable. Now, there might be a little bit of vocab that you might need to quote unquote like pre-teach or either post on the board, which is completely fine. But everything that they need is in their hands and they get all of that quote unquote practice and pronunciation as well. Was there a question?
Just teacher was asking, uh, what exactly are chat mats? Are they a poster? Are they a mat on the floor? I've seen a few that are more like a worksheet. How exactly would you use these in your classroom?
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, David. And thank you so much for asking that question. So chat mats, if we think of um like a placemat, if we are familiar like with setting the table where you have your fork and your spoon and then your knife on the other side, it's basically it's like a worksheet. So exactly like this. And what it is, it has specific phrases, like either memorized phrases, and it's centered in on a particular theme. So, for example, this one here by Amy Lenord, Anchors in Age, which you can find if you use TPT. I believe that's where her things are housed. Um, this theme is on check-in. Like, how are you? This one is how are you? This one is how was your weekend? How is your family? How are your classes? What do you need now? And so typically on the chat mat, you're going to have a lot of visuals because we like to use more visuals as much as possible next to whatever it is, whatever the word is, that we want them to understand without doing the full quote unquote like translation. Um, I keep them in my classroom because I use them all the time. And when I know that I'm going to use them, I'll put like a couple on each pod. The way my room is set up, my students sit in a group of 4. And so typically speaking, I'll tell them it'll be on the agenda. Like, okay, we're going to do a check-in. I want you to talk to 3 or 4 different people, and you are going to ask them questions about their weekend, and then you're going to check in with them. And it's gotten to the point now where I ask my students in the target language, like, how many minutes do we need in order to do this? And they'll tell me either between 5 or 6 minutes. And I always tell them you have to get up from your group and you have to walk to another group. Because I notice my high school students, they just like to sit. They don't want to get up, they don't want to move. So this is another way to really get them up and moving. So I'll let them talk for 5 minutes and they'll chat with someone. And then after that, I might do a pause and we'll do like a whole group check-in where I might call on certain people. So that's an example of how you can use it. If you are teaching a lesson like on the past, if you're specifically um, doing preterite and imperfect, and you just want to center in on preterite, talking about what they did over the weekend or over their break, or even talking about what they did yesterday, that this is a perfect way. Um, this would be a perfect resource to use, and especially to get them communicating. Okay, any other questions? I hope I answered her question or their question. I apologize.
I'm not seeing any other questions at the moment.
Okay. All right, we're gonna go ahead and move on. Okay, so extend your speaking task. So in terms of what I talked about with the chat mats, there's a way that you can extend that speaking so it just doesn't stay as like, okay, we talked about our weekend, we talked about how we were feeling. Okay, now okay, that's it. That was 15 minutes or whatnot. So, what you can do, the same information that they talked about utilizing their chat mats, you can have them journal it down. And this is something that I have done consistently, at least before we got to finals, like every Monday. Perfect. And the only reason why I say that this particular extension is perfect is because I know my students. I know on Mondays they're tired. I know on Mondays they're just like, we don't really feel like doing anything. So I know that journaling and having them write down after they talk for a little bit is perfect. It also fits very well in because we have 45-minute periods that day. On Mondays and Fridays, we have 45-minute periods, and then Tuesday through Thursdays, we have blocks. Okay. And this might be a wonderful low prep activity to put in as well after maybe like a pause or like a brain break if you are teaching in longer blocks, to kind of take the onus like off of you depending on what it is that you are doing. So what I do and what I did, these are actual pictures of my whiteboard in terms of what we did. So the two questions I have up here are three. Yeah, I've got three questions up here. I've got how are you? How was your vacation? And what do you need now? Right? So then underneath that, I have three boxes. Okay. So I went over after my students did the check in and talk to their classmates for the 5, 6 minutes. We went over which particular verbs we would need here in order to give them that scaffolding that they needed to be prepared to write. So they knew, okay, down here, Profe London says, okay, I've got to first express how I'm feeling. Then I'm going to talk about how my vacation was. And I think we had just come from winter break or something. And then I added, you all are going to have to explain to me why. So I added por qué. Okay, so because. And then I have down here, I need blank because blah, blah, blah. So this was a point where I was really building and pushing them to start giving me more explanation. And if you notice over here, this is the other list of vocabulary that I have here that I asked my students. I'm like, okay, now that we are going to write what it is that we were just talking about with either our 3 or 4 people that we had a chance to talk to, what else, what other words that do we need to write down that maybe you want to use that we don't know yet? And this is exactly what I did. So then after that, I gave my students time to write. And so what I used, if you all are familiar, Comprehensible Classroom by Martina Bex. She has a wonderful, wonderful free write form. And on the right-hand side, I'm going to try and move this over here. I'm kind of like, yeah, okay. On the right-hand side, she has the ACTFL performance descriptors going from novice low, novice mid, novice high. And so I would give them time to write. I didn't time it because I just didn't want to do that. That wasn't really the sole focal for my students. I wanted them to see how much they could write with what they already knew based on what they talked about in the target language. So I would collect it, and then maybe like a week later or so, I would pass it back and I would just highlight where they were. And then we did this the next week. And then each week we did this, they were improving. So this is another way to that you can extend your speaking task without really having to do too much prep there. Any questions?
So I see one question saying, okay, why not write before doing the conversation, before speaking?
You can't, I guess I would need to know right specifically, right what specifically I would need to know. I just want to, yeah.
That was me. Sorry, here, let me put my video on.
Okay.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Julie. I was just wondering, you said you had the kids come in and you kind of prompted them with your questions, and then you had your vocab words on the right, and it seemed like you said you kind of had them speaking the stuff on the board first, and then you had them write. So my question is, why not have them like collect their minds together and like write out, the answers to your questions and then speak? Is there wisdom behind that? Was that a conscious decision, or you could do either or first?
Okay. It was, I know for me, personally speaking, it was a conscious decision. Meaning, I'm going to go back here. So, for example, because we included the check-in, they had already talked about this, like with their partners. And so, because I was like, you know what, let me take this to the next step. So, they had already seen this and they already have access to it on their tables. So for me personally speaking, I didn't really, feel a need to have to like rewrite per se everything. And so because they had access to these chat mats like on their desk and they were using them while they were talking, because I wanted them to, not only did I want them to be able to focus in on the input in terms of like reading and really, thinking through what it was that they wanted to say. Um, but I wanted them to have a little bit more, flexibility. So it's kind of like the interpersonal task per se. I didn't want it to be scripted. That wasn't my particular focus. I wanted them to have some flexibility, even if they were like in, and I'm gonna go back, let me go back here. I'm like touching everything. Um, even if even if they were in conversation and if they started with hi, how are you? And if they didn't know, where they wanted to go next, and if there was a little bit of a pause between them and their partners, I was okay with that because I really wanted them to be challenged in a sense of like, no, I don't want you to pre-write what it is you want to say yet. I want you to be able to utilize what you have in front of you, the check-in, because you're gonna check in with your partner, ask them how they're doing, how their weekend went, and then I want you to go do it. So really building their confidence and the level of that spontaneous interpersonal. And for some of the students, I mean, I would hear other questions that came up, like, how's it going? And then a couple of students started using, oh, where? Okay, when? And so that was really what I was going for there. And then but by that time when we got to the extended speaking task, which is the journal, then we recapped. So like, okay, I want you all to process. what were the questions that we asked? And 90% of them were able to, go back, take a look at their chat mat, and they were able to tell me. Because I really wanted them to think through in terms of the interpersonal, spontaneous process versus it being scripted per se, which is a little bit more presentational.
Okay, I'm seeing another question. Following up on the journaling, the teacher's asking, when you went through and highlighted the level on the rubric, did you also proofread and check the students' errors?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay. So because this was for me, this was an interpersonal, this was an informal, my words are getting trouble. This wasn't an informal write. So what I did, what I would highlight, and this was something that I coined from a really, really awesome friend of mine that would do this. I would highlight everything that they wrote that was comprehensible. So, could I understand what they were writing? Did it make sense? I would highlight that. I was not checking for accent marks. I was not checking for spelling. I was not checking for punctuation. Now, if a student wrote down a word and if it was misspelled, and if it was a situation where it was like, okay, this is misspelled, I'm not understanding what it is that they're writing here, I would not highlight it. So my process was that I would highlight everything that was comprehensible. So then that way, when I passed the paper back to the student, they could look, they could look and they would see like, oh, now it was a little, it was interesting at first because a couple students were like, oh my gosh, I got all this wrong. I was like, no, you got all of it right. And they're like, oh, they're like, okay. And so that process, at least for me, that really encourages them. Now, for a presentational right, so something, for example, like a written exam where I'm assessing them on either their short response or either with them writing about what kind of food they like, when I give them a rubric that says, like, hey, practice structures, they know that means that, okay, she's going to be looking at making sure that we have singular form and not plural. And when they see another category that says like capitalization, punctuation, okay, for this one, Prove London is looking to make sure that we have capital letters, punctuation, and so forth. Any other questions?
Excellent. I see a couple of thank yous, so I think we're good to continue.
Okay, awesome. These are great questions, you all. Thank you. Because oftentimes I don't think about the process. I just like do. It's like, oh. Okay. So another low prep activity that I enjoy that I recently actually just did were creative retails. Okay. So we read a lot in my class. My students are responsible for reading the agenda. That's all in Spanish. The puedos, as I call them, excuse me, in Spanish, and we will go through it to make sure that they, understand it. And yes, they are novice learners, so I do push them to do that because I know that they can do it. And we also read a variety of like short texts, in addition to short stories. And so what I decided to do, there was a short story. It was for practice, like a reading practice for it was a exam on food. That was the name of the unit, and there were a lot of things like what they prefer, the types of food, when whether or not it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner. There were some stem changing verbs, different things like that. And so what I decided to do with the practice reading, and again, this was not something I wrote, it was on our drive, it was available, and I thought to myself, I said, okay, how can we make this a little bit more spicy versus let's read through it and then circle the multiple choice question. I didn't want them to do that. So on the fly, I said, you know what? I want to see that they understand this, but we're going to go about it a couple of ways. So I gave them options. They could either act out what they understood from the short text. Somebody had to be the narrator. Everybody else had to act, of course. They could do an interview. So the main character in the short story would be the interviewee, and everybody else would interview that person. They could pretend like they were on a podcast and they could summarize it, or they could choose to do a drawing or color. And I added that because number one, coloring is just fun, and high schoolers love to color and doodle and draw. And for a lot of them, especially our neurodivergent thinkers, it is a way that they focus. I have quite a few artists in my classroom, and I try to keep that in mind. Like, even whenever we're, if I'm speaking in Spanish and we're doing an activity, I will see them drawing, and that's how they focus. So I wanted to add that option. And then I came up with just like a quick little rubric. This was something I already had, but I just came up with it. Understanding, we can understand the main idea by incorporating all of the main idea questions in my retail answer: who, what, where, when, why, how. Organization, we retell the story or text in sequential order with precise details. Obviously, that's a 4. I utilize a 4-point scale for proficiency. And then I added one of my favorite categories: intercultural competence, reflection, and connection. I cannot express how important the intercultural competence is, because we can talk about cultures, communities in a variety of different settings, but if we are not asking those reflective questions of how they're connecting to the content, we can't assume that they are growing in intercultural competence. And I want to thank Dory CP for that one. And so they organized in groups. I let them pick their groups, and that's because I know my students in my classes. You might not want to let them pick your groups. And they had to come up with how they were going to demonstrate understanding of this short text. The text was literally it was 1 page, and they had the entire class period to do it. I didn't want to add another activity because, again, I know my students and I know their pace when it comes to working. And we did this during a block schedule. So without me even saying, you're going to have to read it first, they already knew that. So I saw each group, they pulled out their highlighters, and this is something else that I've emphasized with my students when it comes to reading. Highlight, underline, circle, make little notes in the margin while you are reading, because that also encourages and increases your understanding in any language, period, as far as getting you to focus in on what you're reading. And then after each group had, read and came up with their plan as far as what they were going to do, and I had them recorded. We use Google Classroom, so somebody had to record, and then they uploaded the video to the Google Classroom assignment. And after that, I had them do a self-assessment with this rubric. I'm like, you're going to do a quick self-assessment. What do you all think? How do you all think you did? Would you give yourselves 3s? Would you give yourselves 4s? And that was the assignment. And I got a lot of great feedback from that. This is actually an example of one student, incredibly bright. She wanted to do the drawing option, and it didn't shock me because she doesn't really like to talk that much. She's a bit of an introvert. And her and her partner, they did the drawing option. They read, did the drawing option, and then they self-assessed using that rubric. So that is another thing that you can do, especially if you already have a text readily available. If you're using a textbook, cool, you can use a short reading in the textbook, have the students choose whichever short reading, or either have them all choose the same one, and you can do the same activity. And this is a great way for them to demonstrate their comprehension of the story. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. All right. This is a good one. Jenga conversation. I'm gonna credit my amazing friend and wonderful, wonderful language educator, Meredith White, on this one. I did not come up with this one. If you have Jenga blocks, this is a great activity to do. I did this with my middle schoolers. You can also do this with your high schoolers as well. If you have foam a die, really, you just need like one die. So basically, how it goes, because there are 6 little dots on the die, each number represents a theme. Okay. So this is kind of a review, quote unquote, activity. So this one here, I have number 1 was weekend, past and future. And this was for my, what was this? I think my 5th and 6th graders at the time. Okay. And we had already gone over it. We were in a routine where we were utilizing that weekend talk with that chat mat that I talked about. So I knew they already knew the vocab. Did they have the chat mats with them and on their iPads in case they needed them? Yes, always for notes. Number 2 was school life. So we had an earlier theme, I want to say in the fall, where we talked about school life and they had all the vocabulary. That was the particular unit. So I knew that they could talk about and ask questions about that. This one, Dia de la Raza, this is a day that is honored around, I want to say October. We did like a short reading, a passage about it in the target language. So I knew that they had that vocab. Escape Cubano, if you teach Spanish, this is about a family, actually 2 families that end up escaping from Cuba. Loosely, I want to say based on a true story. It's written by Myra Cannon. This was a reader that my 6th graders read, so I knew they had that info. I knew they had the vocab, the questions, they were ready. 5 was food, drinks, and health. So again, food, we discussed that. And then 6 was about the Garifuna people, the indigenous people living over in Central America. We did a short reading, the Afro-Indigenous people. We did a short reading on that. And so basically what it is, one person rolls the die, whichever number it lands on, okay, that person has to ask a question in Spanish about that topic, right? So if I roll a number 1, then I'm going to ask someone in my group, typically a group of 3, 4 works if possible. I'm going to ask someone in my group, what did you do over the weekend? It'll be in the target language. The other person has to respond in Spanish. It doesn't have to be perfect. And that's the beauty of this, because it really builds comprehension. You want to give them an opportunity to acquire and practice the language. Okay. If the other person answers in Spanish with an appropriate response, even if it's a short response, it doesn't have to be in a complete sentence. Okay. They can pull out a block. Okay. I've had other classes where they're like, well, can we do it the opposite way where we build instead? And I'm like, great, that's fine. Okay. This is a wonderful activity. Great for Friday. And again, my suggestion is that when you do an activity like this, you want to utilize themes and topics that you've already covered and that you know that your students have already comprehended, that they have that input and they can use it. For certain students, they did ask me, you know, Prof A, can I write the questions down that I want to ask? Sure, totally fine. So this is another great one. Okay. Gallery walks. My favorite. You all, this is what I have to say. So my classroom, the classroom walls are my curriculum. That is how I roll. Um, every year, if you do have a classroom, I know some of us might be sharing, or maybe you push in with a cart and so forth. But what I will say in the beginning of the school year, think about how you can best set up your space for learning for your students, right? I know sometimes, you know, we want to be cutesy with all the bulletin board paper, and yes, you can, but be intentional about it. Even when you're sharing a classroom, and if the teacher, you know, you're sharing with, you know, meet with them and say, hey, I'm going to need the super 7 verbs up here. Okay. I'm gonna need to have to be, I'm gonna need this wall. I'm gonna need this wall for my question words. Okay. Be intentional. Um, pictures. Did this go through? I don't know if it's gonna go through again. Pictures are great. I have pictures of people in my classroom, and I've utilized those for a lesson. So, for example, we did a unit on descriptions, basically. I think it was called like family, La Familia. And so the students were acquiring in terms of how to describe themselves, their family, and other people. So, utilizing the pictures in my room, I came up with, I think I want to say maybe like 3 questions. Um, what do they have? What are they like? And what are their names? And literally typed it up, 3 different columns. I had maybe 20 rows because I had about 20 pictures in my room. They had to walk around on their clipboard and they had to answer those questions based on what they were looking at in the posters in my room. Okay, so great way. Before we did that lesson, we did do one together as a class in order to scaffold so that they had an example. But wonderful. If you have access to a room, or if you know you have access to part of a room or whatnot, use it. That's a wonderful way to plan a low prep lesson. Um, walk and talk is another great one. I learned this one from is a teacher, also a good friend of mine, Sarah Breckley. I did this once during the school year, and here's the reason why I did it once was because it was a day where I had a lot of students out, and there was like maybe 12 students in the room. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that this is for everybody, but if you have the opportunity to do it, then do it. What did we do? We walked out of my classroom and I just started speaking the target language, and I was talking about what there was outside of the classroom. So things like doors, hallway, drinking fountain, office. And then I would ask them questions on the fly, like, how do you say office? Or where's the bathroom? Excellent, excellent way. It's a very quick lesson. Um, if you want, you can follow it up where they have a clipboard, paper. You can get them to take some notes on the vocabulary that they are acquiring. You can add some pictures. That's something else you want to do. You can do that as well. But walk and talk is great. The other thing, get outside. If you're able to get outside, go outside. This picture was taken last year when I finished up my middle school career, 9-year career as a middle school teacher. And it became like a tradition with my students where we would go outside, we'd go to the turf, and somebody would have a soccer ball and they would divide up in teams. I tell them, you have to divide yourselves up in teams first. I'm not doing it when we get outside. So you all better have this organized. and I would let them play. And again, great way to get to know the kids, talk to the kids. So if possible, that is a awesome thing to do, some movement. All right, so now what, as we're nearing the end, I'm gonna move this over. I feel like my face is everywhere. Okay. So reflection, which activities can my students benefit from? Okay. I get that we know our students, and especially if you just ended the school year, you're gonna, you're gonna connect with more students that you're gonna be seeing in the fall. So you want to get to know them, like which activities can my students benefit from and where they're at. When do I want to use certain activities? That's another thing too. Now, all of the activities that I talked about, you can totally use them throughout the year. Well, I don't know. If you live in Chicago, then you might not want to go outside in the winter or in Colorado. Right? So maybe not that one, y'all. Okay. But in terms of the when do I want to use certain activities, think about your class structure, like when you have your class, when you have your classes. Like, for example, I have a class at the end of the day, seventh period. By the time they get to me, especially at this time of year, it's it's like pulling teeth. So what did we do last week? I think it was like Friday, because I was pretty much done because I knew this week was exams. I was like, okay, we're gonna go outside. That's what we did. Now we did go over one part of a final exam review. I can't remember which part it was. It might have been reading. I wanted to make sure that they had that one down. But after that, I was like, okay, we're gonna go outside. It's nice. So some things to really think about. And let me move. Okay. That is it, y'all. Thank you all so much for coming, taking the time this evening. I know Wednesday night, and I know if you're still in the classroom like me, I know you're tired. We're almost there. If you're done, yay, looking forward to being in that position. My website is bit.ly and then that slash, and then it's K London. There you're gonna find everything. It's kind of like my hub to my social media, to my curriculum coaching program, to podcasts. There's a whole plethora of things. Um, and then I do have a private Facebook group. It's called Culturally Diverse and Equitable Curriculum Design Group. I know that's a bit lengthy, but if you type in Trailblaze in Language Learning, you'll see my page, and then you'll get an automatic invitation to the private Facebook group. But thank you all so much. I hope you were able to really pull from something. I hope that this was encouraging and incredibly helpful to you.
Uh, yes, absolutely. Thank you for joining us. I know that we had a couple more questions here in the
Yeah.
chat if you got another minute or two. And then I know that my colleague wanted to hop in and mention another webinar that we're just about to host. So one that I said that I would definitely follow up on was a teacher back when we were talking about Jenga was asking, wait, you use this for your elementary students too? Does that work well? And are there any other activities that you'd like to suggest?
Sure. So the Jenga, I used it for my middle school students. And that was fifth, sixth. Now, elementary, maybe fourth grade. I think I mean, it really depends on your students in terms of where they're at in their journey of language acquisition. I know with my particular students, as far as those topics that I had for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I was in a school where they had already had Spanish beginning at preschool all the way up to fourth grade. So there was a lot by the time the fifth graders got to me, because I taught them for fifth and sixth. By the time they got to me, there was a lot of foundation there. And then I used a lot of input. So at least 90, I would say between 90 to like 98%, I was in the target language with my fifth and sixth graders. So it can be done. It really you really have to think about, your topics. That's why I said like after maybe, you want to use that activity for like a review. It can work that way. Greetings, even if it's like, how are you? Okay, they can pull a block out, so it's really up to you in terms of how you want to use it and who you want to use it with, but you can. Yes.
So I see a question about the picture talks and the gallery. Let me find that one again. What did they have for the gallery walk? Meaning, the students talked about pictures that they were assigned or that they liked. Where was that assignment pulling from?
Okay, sorry. So I've got kind of like a little video here. So I don't know if you all can see. There's a picture of the late Dr. Maya Angelou and Malala. Let me see if I can go back. Um, okay. So yeah, these are pictures that I purposely put in my classroom, not only for just interculturality and culture, but I knew I was going to use them. So they already had access to the pictures that I had up in my classroom. Now, if you want to use, Google Slides, and use images that you have there, that's totally fine. But because those pictures were already placed and up in my classroom, I remember one day I was coming in and I was incredibly tired. I was like, I had a long weekend with my own children and I was just tired. And it was a Tuesday, and I was like, okay, what can I do that's going to be applicable, get my students moving, and also take more the onus off of me so that they are engaged with acquiring descriptions and context. And I saw my pictures. So yeah, I keep pictures of different people up on my wall, that represent different communities, all the way from Afro-Indigenous to Afro-Latin to Indigenous to a number of different people within the Spanish speaking community. So, yep.
Okay. I'm thinking one more. There's a teacher asking, um, did you have much success with uh, getting students to talk when you were outdoors and doing the soccer game, etc.?
Okay. So, yeah. So that's the thing with the outside. Um, for me, because I wanted to get them out, I was like, let's just go out. That was something I just left. I did not require them to speak in the target language most of the time. I did not. I use that time to hang out, get to know them, talk to them about other things. So again, it's a lot of that connection time, that classroom community time. However, I do know that should you plan to take your students, outside, honestly, I would say make sure you have a clipboard, maybe something to write with, right? It can be done where you can require them they can speak in the target language. It can be. And I say that because I do know of a very close teacher friend of mine that actually just did something like that. But for me, no, mine was strictly like go outside, we're gonna hang out. No, I'm speaking Spanish when we're outside, not this time, but yeah. But the walk and talk, I was completely in Spanish.
Excellent. Then absolutely. Thanks for joining us. I know that Justin wanted to say a few things here, so I'm gonna let him talk.
Yeah, hi FMA, hi Kia. Great job. I wasn't here at the very beginning because I was making dinner for the fam, pancakes for dinner. But thank you for sharing all these ideas, very needful at this time of the year. For everyone else who's here, I'm Justin. I work for BOSIS and I also work on another thing that I'll tell you about in a moment. You're technically dismissed if you want to go. I won't keep you any later. I was just asked to hop on and make the following quick announcement, which is that tomorrow, if you feel like you haven't gotten enough evening Zoom sessions in. Tomorrow, we're going to have a little informational session for a really cool product that Voces, the same company that put on this webinar, does. It's called Flangu, and it's basically an online library for students to use and that teachers can use as well. If I may share my screen, I think I'm permitted to share my screen really quickly. Anybody who's here, by the way, have currently used Flangu by any chance? What I'm showing you here, the exact view that I see as a Spanish teacher when I open up the library here. And this is the same thing that my students can see. I can also control what all they see. But basically, the idea is for either Spanish, French, or German, we want to always get lots and lots of reading content, more and more content in front of students, some that we read together, some that students can choose to read independently and at their own pace. And we've tried to provide that here. And so if that's a thing that you think you might be interested in, tomorrow we're going to have a session kind of orienting folks to this. It's been around for a couple of years, but we've recently started making a lot of updates to it. We add more stuff to it every week. So let me throw in the, if you're on any kind of email list of ours, you probably have gotten an email about it, but just in case, if not, and you might be interested. Oh, I see it. I do from Joyce. Lovely. I'm pasting in a link similar to the registration link that you used to sign up for Kia's webinar today. It's the same basic idea. I know that at this point it's short notice because it's just tomorrow. It's going to be a shorter info session, just 40 minutes, something like that. I'll show you the ins and outs here of Flangu. And part of the reason for scheduling it when we are is that we just launched, literally as of last week, a brand new thing where you can add your own texts to Flangu for either just your students to read as well. So if you're someone who, like me, creates a lot of stories with students, or even some of the things that you that you saw Kia demonstrate here, if that yields a text that you want students to do something with, you can actually load them in and take advantage of all the tools that Flangu has built in, which if I go into a book, that includes things like underlined items that students can hover over to get vocab help, adding illustrations, you can add videos, you can add an audio track that you can adjust the speed of, you can throw in some comprehension questions, all kinds of stuff that now, literally as of last week, you can add these things in yourself. And to students, it will look just like another book or another text that exists officially in Flangu, but you can add an unlimited amount of those yourself. And because that's brand new, that's why we decided, hey, let's have a little info session where we tell people about the main Flangu library that I was showing at the beginning, but also about this new version, which we call Flangu Creator, where you can, just the same way as if you're writing a blog post, for example, you can add text, you can have multiple chapters, you can just have a single text, you can throw in images, like I said, audio and a couple other tools for comprehension. So if you're interested, go register using that link that I threw in the chat. If you are interested, but you're not available tomorrow night, which would be totally fine on that short notice, we will record it so that you can have basically a video overview. And either way, you can always go to flangu.com and just start a free trial. You don't even have to enter a credit card that gets charged at the end of the trial or anything like that. It's just straight up free. When it's over, it's over. If you want to poke around there as well. So check that out. If you're interested in that, if you can make it in person, great. If not, keep your eyes peeled for that video. So that's it from me. Again, I'm Justin. Joyce said, should you register? Actually, great question, Joyce. I do recommend registering if you can't attend, because the first people who will get the recording is anyone who is on that registration list. That's actually a really good idea. That doesn't mean that it won't be available. We'll put it on YouTube where anyone can access it, but we will send it directly as soon as it's done, probably the next day, like this Friday, to folks who are on the list because they expressed interest. So really good question, Joyce. Thanks for bringing that up. De rien. All right. Anything else, David, to announce or give people as they go?
I think we're good. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Have a great rest of the evening. Kia, nice to see you, however briefly, and wish all of you a wonderful rest of your evening or day, wherever you may be.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye,
thanks
guys.
for hosting, David, and thanks for sharing, Kia.
Right, it was great.